Hello, welcome to WorkRise Shorts. My name is Bill Congdon, and I'm a research advisor for WorkRise, a research to action network focused on jobs, workers, and mobility, hosted by the Urban Institute. We have a great conversation lined up today with Alex Bartik, Assistant Professor of Economics at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. We'll be diving into his team's latest research findings on addressing drivers of unfair access and registered apprenticeships to design programs that empower workers' decision-making about apprenticeships. Alex, welcome. It's great to have you.
It's great to be here. My co-authors and I are just really excited to talk to folks about this project.
That sounds great. To start, I wondered if you could talk about what exact problem you were hoping your research would address, solve, or advance. What's the change you want to see your research inform?
Apprenticeships provide a really important pathway into a variety of higher earning or otherwise desirable jobs that don't require a college degree. They also typically pay participants during, at least for part of their time during the training, and require no or substantially lower fees compared to those required by, for traditional tertiary education like college degrees. However, historically, minority groups were underrepresented in apprenticeships and jobs that frequently require apprenticeships. For example, a 1970 EEOC report found that Black workers represented only 0.6% of plumbers nationwide. And these disparities, documented in the 60s and 70s, inspired significant amounts of both political and policy discussion at the time, with kind of well-known experiments with attempts to change this, like the Philadelphia Plan, for example, which was an agreement between civil rights groups and some of the trades unions in Philadelphia. So that's kind of like the historical context. And for this project, my co-authors, Marianne Bertrand and Brian Stewart, and the broader team at the Inclusive Economy Lab that we work with, wanted to kind of understand how things had changed since that kind of interest in the 70s. And so we wanted to kind of make three contributions to our knowledge. First, we just kind of wanted to measure what modern underrepresentation in registered apprenticeships looks like. And we use data from the Department of Labor, the RAPIDS data set on registered apprenticeships to do so. Second, we wanted to assess the role of demand side factors, in particular, a potentially important demand side factor, which is discrimination by apprenticeships towards minority potential applicants, in the process of trying to apply to apprenticeships. And so to do that, investigation, we conducted an audit study. Third, we wanted to assess the potential role of supply side factors, such as differences in expectations or knowledge about apprenticeships, as well as differences in kind of preference over training program and job characteristics that could differ between people of different ethnic backgrounds. And kind of in conducting these kind of three streams of analysis, we wanted to provide kind of a rich picture of what's going on with representation in registered apprenticeships in 2025.
And it's an important set of issues and a really interesting suite of methods. Can you tell us what are your key research findings so far?
Yeah, so I'll break them up and talk about those kind of three different categories of analysis that I just discussed. In terms of what just kind of documenting, well, what does underrepresentation look right now? And so we use the RAPIDS data set, which is this administrative data set on everybody who enters the registered apprenticeships for states to participate in the RAPID system, which lets us know kind of, well, what are the characteristics in terms of kind of racial and ethnic background of folks who are entering apprenticeships, and how does that compare to the local area, right? And we see a few things. First, we see, once you kind of first, gaps are lower than they used to be. I mean, there's now a non-trivial share of Black and Hispanic apprentices. We're no longer in the situation where 0.6% of people trying to become, plumbers or people trying to become plumbers are Black. So there is kind of a much more meaningful entry than there was in the 70s. But second, there still are meaningful gaps, particularly once you kind of adjust for kind of people who we think are in are in the age and education situation where they're most likely to potentially want to enter an apprenticeship, in particular kind of younger people who have a high school degree but don't have a college degree. There's still kind of pretty large gaps in terms of the share of Black and Hispanic folks who start apprenticeships and the share of white folks who start apprenticeships in that age and education group. And there are other gaps as well. Black and Hispanic apprentices also have lower completion rates of apprentices, and they also are slightly more likely to attend what look like lower quality programs on some dimensions. So they look like they're more likely to attend programs with lower completion rates and lower exit wages, whereas white apprentices are more likely to attend programs with slightly higher wages and completion rates. So, it's a different situation than in 1970, but there are still, I think, kind of meaningful gaps between groups and in the extent to which they're kind of accessing or able to access apprenticeships in the present day. The next, after documenting kind of what the current gaps look like, we then conducted an audit study to understand the extent to which direct discrimination by apprenticeship providers might play a role in explaining these gaps that we just talked about. And so what we did is we sent roughly 11,000 emails to nearly 1,800 programs between fall 2023 and summer 2024, where we sent these emails from fictitious profiles inquiring about how to enter the apprenticeship. And those fictitious profiles had traditionally Black, Hispanic, and white sounding names, kind of a classic audit study. And we then compared what do the response rates look like for inquiries about an apprenticeship program for people from different signaling different ethnic backgrounds. And then also we used large language models to measure the quality of those responses. To try to understand not only are you getting a response, but is your question getting answered? Is the response polite? Is the response personalized to what you said in some way? And so that kind of provides us a kind of a rich way of measuring whether, at least at this part of trying to get into an apprenticeship, the kind of part about getting information, figuring out how to apply, if there's discrimination in that stage. Obviously, this audit can't necessarily tell us if there's, other stages, and it doesn't necessarily tell us about other stages. What we find is the following. There were no differences at all, kind of almost exactly zero in the response rates to these emails by race. So white, Black, and Hispanic, they had very similar response rates from the apprenticeships that were emailed. So roughly 40% of people on average got a response, and that was almost identical across the three kind of ethnic and racial groups. And we also saw very similar measures of quality between Black and white email. It's like the quality of the response, and by quality I mean, is it polite? Is it helpful? Does it answer the question? That kind of thing looks very similar between Black and white of folks emailing with kind of Black and white presenting names. Now there is a modest lower quality, it looks like, for folks emailing with Hispanic sounding names. Although I have to caveat that it's not gigantic in magnitude, and it's not always statistically significant depending on the specification. So, so it's just, it needs to be interpreted with caution because it's not that big, and it's not always precise. But there is some gap there, driven, for example, by Hispanic emailers are less likely to receive answers to the questions that they pose in the email. And so that kind of closes out like the audit study, where I think, overall we find not a ton of evidence for a lot of direct discrimination in this phase of the application process into apprenticeships, with the possible exception of a small difference in quality for people emailing with Hispanic signaling names. We then turn to trying to understand how the kind of information and perceptions and preferences of people who might want to do an apprenticeship vary across racial and ethnic groups. So we conducted a survey of roughly 3,000 folks who were 20 to 40 who were male and who were not currently in school, but had a high school or GED, but didn't have an associate's or bachelor's degree. So people we think are in the kind of most likely set to potentially be thinking about doing an apprenticeship. And we asked them questions about kind of three categories of their thoughts. First, kind of just what's their experience with apprenticeships? Do they know someone who's done an apprenticeship, et cetera? Second, what do they think they would get out of an apprenticeship relative to an alternative option like getting an associate's degree? And third, what do they care about in a training program or a job? Do they prefer shorter training programs? What kind of aspects of a job? Do they really want a job that they can work from home? Like what characteristics? Because kind of differences in kind of preferences over kind of programs or jobs could also kind of drive some of these findings. And I think we have two kind of broad sets of findings from the survey. First, there is a gap between both, all like Hispanic, Black, and white respondents all think that they'll earn more after an associate's degree than an apprenticeship, but that gap is larger for Black and Hispanic survey respondents. And so it does look like kind of expectations about the returns to an associate's degree versus an apprenticeship might differ for Black and Hispanic respondents than white respondents. And in particular, they might think that they're kind of more negative to apprenticeships relative to associate's degrees compared to white respondents. We then look at kind of preferences over, what you care about in a training program or a job characteristic. And we kind of measure this using what we call a discrete choice experiment, where we show folks, here are two training programs and jobs who have some aspects that are kind of randomly chosen to be different, and which one would you prefer to do, right? And so we can use that to calculate, well, how much are you willing to give up in terms of earnings to get different kind of job characteristics, or how much are you willing to get up in terms of post-program earnings to get different training program characteristics. And here we find kind of, I think, what I would call some mixed evidence. For example, relative to white survey respondents, Black individuals prefer shorter programs that cost less. But it's not clear which way this goes in terms of apprenticeships, because apprenticeship programs have less direct costs. They're you actually get paid during the apprenticeship, right? But they're also longer. And so it's not, and we're still trying to do some thinking, and as we'll talk about in a little bit, some follow-up surveys to figure out how to figure out which of those forces dominates. Similarly, for kind of what people of different backgrounds care about in terms of job characteristics, it's kind of mixed. So for example, Hispanic respondents put a lot of weight relative to white respondents on being able to work from home. But they put less negative weight than white respondents do on having a job that has heavy physical demands. And those, again, kind of go in opposite directions, because some apprenticeships take you into jobs that have pretty high physical demands, but they also are less likely to be able to work from home. And those kind of go in different directions. And so there's not like a sharp, it's not totally obvious that the preferences as a whole of Black or Hispanic respondents favor apprenticeships versus other training programs. Although I think, we're trying to kind of do some additional analysis and conduct another survey, so I think we can kind of maybe kind of tease that out more than we do right now.
Really interesting set of findings. Turning to thinking about the implications of this work, I wondered if you could speak to which actors you think are best positioned to advance your research, if it's policymakers, certain employers, advocates, workers themselves. What do you hope they will do or change?
Well, I guess my first comment would be that this is one of those feature of research where we have more negative findings than positive, and that we find evidence that certain things don't drive the gap, but we have less clear evidence on what drives the gap. However, that being said, I think there are some kind of learnings we can have going forward. And let's just say that we kind of take our evidence that it's on a ton of direct discrimination at the entry side, that there are these completion rate gaps, and that there's these gaps in expectations about program returns. Just assume we're 100% correct about that. If you take that at face value, I think this suggests a few things. First, thinking about how apprenticeships can provide more information and exposure to potential apprentices from who are, from minority groups, right? How can they help, change perceptions or get more information out or more exposure to kind of what actually goes on in these programs and what some of the benefits are. Second is, we don't see kind of, these like huge amounts of discrimination at the kind of at the contact stage, at the inquiry stage, but we do see these large completion rate gaps, and there's kind of a lot of explanations for that. We can't provide direct evidence on why there's these completion rate gaps, but we think it's pretty striking and they're pretty large. And we think thinking about programs or modifications to how apprenticeships are run that could help that could help kind of reduce those completion rate gaps. Because to some extent, those are folks who are already in apprenticeships. They've already, found their way in, and figuring out ways that they can be supported to help finish them and then have successful careers in the program is something that I think doing kind of clever and worthwhile experimentation on how we can address that, I think, would be important. And just one thing I want to highlight, a follow-up thing that I think we're doing to help kind of push at some of our results and kind of refine some of these areas where we couldn't fully give a sharp answer, and also to give just kind of folks who are potentially considering apprenticeships from different backgrounds the ability to kind of convey what they think. We're doing another follow-up survey of people who are in this set who might do apprenticeships to try to kind of tease out some parts we think we weren't able to tease out in our original survey, as well as we just added more open-ended questions to that, and that will kind of allow kind of the Black and Hispanic respondents in the survey to kind of say, well, just in an open-ended way, kind of how are you thinking about these programs, and I think that can kind of be, and also a way to kind of generate some additional guidance to help kind of guide policy in this area.
That sounds, I think, like it'd be really valuable evidence. So we'll keep an eye for that. Alex, I want to thank you for joining us and sharing your work. We're excited to see more research on this topic from you and your colleagues in the future. To learn more about this research, please visit the Research and Data page on WorkRise's website at workrisenetwork.org.